Historical perspectives on gender and women's rights. This week, we'll explore the historical journey of women's rights in Africa, focusing on how gender roles and equality have evolved over time. By examining the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial periods, we'll uncover the resilience and agency of African women in the face of systemic discrimination. This historical context is essential for understanding the roots of contemporary gender inequalities and for developing strategies to address them. 1. Pre-colonial gender roles in Africa. Before colonial rule, many African societies were structured around gendered divisions of labor, but women often held significant influence in economic and political spheres. For example, Igbo society, Nigeria. Women participated in commerce and had the power to organize collective actions. A notable example is the Aba Women's War of 1929, where women protested against colonial taxation and policies that threatened their economic autonomy. This movement demonstrated the collective power of women in challenging oppressive systems. Asante Queen Mothers, Ghana. In the Asante Kingdom, Queen Mothers played a crucial role in advising kings and managing local governance. They were not just symbolic figures, but held real political power, influencing decisions on war, peace, and resource allocation. These examples highlight how pre-colonial African societies often recognized the value of women's contributions to governance, trade, and community life. Understanding these historical roles is crucial for challenging the narrative that African women have always been marginalized. 2. The impact of colonialism on gender dynamics. Colonialism brought significant changes to gender relations in Africa. Colonial powers imposed Western patriarchal systems that marginalized women and eroded traditional female leadership roles. For example, erosion of female leadership. Colonial administrations often sidelined women from political and economic decision-making. For instance, the British colonial system in Nigeria replaced the dual-sex political system of the Igbo with a male-dominated hierarchy, reducing women's influence. Restricted access to education. Colonial education systems prioritized boys, leaving girls with limited access to formal education. This created long-term disparities in literacy and economic opportunities for women. Economic marginalization. Colonial economies often excluded women from formal employment, pushing them into informal and low-paying jobs. For example, in Kenya, women were largely confined to subsistence farming, while men were encouraged to participate in cash crop production. These colonial legacies continue to shape gender inequalities in many African countries today. By understanding this history, we can better address the systemic barriers that women face. 3. Post-colonial women's movements. The post-independence era saw the rise of women's movements advocating for political, social, and economic rights. Women played pivotal roles in liberation struggles and the shaping of national policies. For example, South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle. Women were at the forefront of the fight against apartheid. The Federation of South African Women, FSAW, organized the historic 1956 Women's March, where 20,000 women protested against past laws. Leaders like Albertina Sisulu and Winnie Madikizela Mandela became symbols of resistance and resilience. Liberation movements in Kenya. During the Mau Mau Rebellion, women provided critical support as fighters, spies, and caregivers. Their contributions were essential to the success of the movement, yet their roles were often overlooked in post-independence narratives. These movements laid the groundwork for contemporary gender advocacy, demonstrating the power of collective action in challenging systemic oppression. 4. The influence of African feminism. African feminism differs from Western feminism in its emphasis on communal well-being, social justice, and the intersectionality of race, class, and gender. African feminists argue that gender equality cannot be achieved without addressing broader social and economic inequalities. For example, Wangari Maathai, Kenya. Founder of the Greenbelt movement, Maathai linked environmental sustainability with women's empowerment. She recognized that environmental degradation disproportionately affected women, who relied on natural resources for their livelihoods. Nawal El-Saadawi, Egypt. A prominent feminist writer and activist, El Sadawi challenged patriarchal norms and advocated for women's reproductive rights. Her work highlighted the intersection of gender, class, and religion in shaping women's experiences. Aminata Touré, Senegal. As Senegal's former prime minister, Touré championed gender equality in politics and governance. Her leadership demonstrated the importance of women's representation in decision-making processes. These leaders exemplify how African feminism integrates gender advocacy with broader social and environmental issues, offering a more holistic approach to achieving equality. 5. Contemporary implications for social change. The historical struggles of African women continue to influence gender policies and social movements today. Organizations like UN Women Africa and the African Union's Agenda 2063 prioritize gender equality as a cornerstone for sustainable development. For example, UN Women Africa. This organization works to empower women and girls through initiatives focused on economic empowerment, leadership, and ending gender-based violence. Their programs often draw on historical examples of women's resilience and agency. Agenda 2063. The African Union's development framework includes specific goals for gender equality, such as increasing women's participation in politics and eliminating harmful practices like child marriage and female genital mutilation, FGM. By understanding the historical trajectory of women's rights in Africa, we can develop culturally relevant strategies to address persistent challenges such as gender-based violence, economic inequality, and underrepresentation in leadership. Reflection and application. Throughout the week, you will engage in reflection questions and activities designed to help you connect the historical content to your own experiences and community context. For example, how have colonial policies shaped contemporary gender inequalities in your community? Can you identify a historical African woman leader whose legacy continues to impact gender advocacy today? How does African feminism differ from Western feminism, and how can it be applied to social change initiatives in your region? These reflections will help you apply the historical lessons to real-world situations and develop actionable strategies for promoting gender equality.